Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Redeemer Lutheran Church Bible study on the book of Ruth. Beautiful, beautiful book of Ruth. I'm Pastor Eric Kleinschmidt from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Highland, Indiana. If you missed the introduction to our Ruth Bible study, I will put that link right up above, and you can go back to chapter 1 and the introduction and get set up for our study today. Today, we're going to be introduced to Boaz, the picture of masculinity, a forerunner, a type, a prefigurement of Jesus Christ, and then also Ruth as a picture of his bride, the church. All right, that means you. We're going to see their qualities. We're going to learn about what it means to be a real mensch in today's world, and all that comes from chapter 2 here in the book of Ruth. Let's get started. Chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's. Okay, this is important because remember, the land that Elimelech sold to someone else before he went to the land of Moab because there was a famine was meant to remain in his family forever. All right? God set up many avenues in the Old Testament for the land that had been promised to God's people from Abraham on down to remain in their tribal allotments and their family names. It was one of the most important things for all of God's people, okay? So this is important. After Elimelech dies and he has no sons anymore, the land remains Naomi's, but she needs a male relative to buy it back from the person it was sold to. At least if that's going to happen anytime before the year of Jubilee, which is the year of like 50 years. Every 50 years, you have to give the land back to its familial owners. And so usually the value of the land, the buyback price or the redeemer price, would be calculated based on how many years until the next Jubilee. Okay, so that's how this all works, and it's all life. It is absolute. This is how people lived in that time. It made total sense to them, and even if we find it very difficult to kind of wrap our heads around. But Naomi has a relative, okay? So that is somebody of his same clan. That's Judah, the tribe of Judah, and particularly from Bethlehem, Ephrathites. This is important because we're going to see the Redeemer come from that tribe and that land, and that's going to be a picture of Jesus who is yet to come. I'm giving away the middle of our study today. But we have a relative of her husband's, okay? A worthy man of the clan of Elimelech whose name was Boaz, right? Now, this is one of our remember points, okay? You have to let the Bible say what it means, okay? There is a lot in Ruth that people like to read into. They like to take our messed up male-female relationships that we struggle with today and read them into this male-female relationship in the Old Testament. And while there are certain things about people that don't ever change, I think we do a disservice to Ruth and Boaz by looking at this and saying, although the Bible says that Boaz was a worthy man, I bet that when he and Ruth were alone, they kind of fudged the numbers a little bit. You know, like that's no. Same thing with Joseph. The Bible tells us very clearly that Joseph did not know Mary until they were wed, okay? So to read into anything improprietous, I think that's a word, does them great disservice. And it actually denies the biblical truth that's right in front of you. I'm going to come back to this point when Ruth goes to see Boaz at the threshing floor, because that is an event that is going to be just surrounded by all kinds of accusations or potential accusations for impropriety, both in just its human context, but also in its more pagan context, that the threshing floor was where a lot of pagan worship happened. But here we're told very clearly that Boaz is a worthy man, actually a mighty man of valor, the Bible says. And that mighty man of valor is actually a term that's used for warriors who were like SEAL Team 6, man. Like they were the best of the best. They were just good at their job. They had been through war before. They were the most frightening warriors. That's the mighty men of valor in the Old Testament. Boaz is called one of those, but it's more in the context of his respectability and his honor and his character. And I don't think that we should besmirch that with our own imaginative accusations. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Then let's read the text for what it says. And the text tells us that Boaz was a worthy man, an honorable gentleman. Sometimes it's translated because of its connotation here. We're going to see in this that Boaz has several great qualities. And quite honestly, if you want a picture of biblical masculinity, of everything that men should aspire to be, Boaz is a pretty good example of that. Yes, there's a lot of advice and a lot of life patterning that's available in the book of Proverbs, as Solomon writes that to his sons. But here in the character and the way that Boaz lives his values, we're going to see what it means to be a real mensch. The German word for man, it's a connotation. It's just he's a boss man. Man, he's a boss. He everything that's good about masculinity, Boaz seems to embody. He is honorable. He is generous. He is protective. He is strong, and he is obeyed by others. He's a leader of men. They obey him because he is all those things. Such wonderful masculinity we see in the person of Boaz. And let's not deny that because we think he might, like Ruth a little bit too much. Anyway, he's a worthy man. So it points out, we're introduced to this man from Bethlehem, from the tribe of Judah and the clan of Elimelech, and he is a mighty man. So he's a good guy. Contrast that with what Ruth is known as. Once again, we have her called Ruth the Moabite. She can't get past that. She can't outlive that moniker. She will be a foreigner, and a foreigner that God has cast off because of their origin. Remember that the Moabites were the product of Lot and his daughter. And also they tried to curse God's people when they came out of Egypt, and God turned around that for blessing. But then God said, I cast off the Moabites forever. So there's a lot of distrust and dislike for people that come from Moab. And so she's a foreigner, and she's the worst of the worst. And she's contrasted here with the righteousness and goodness and the worthiness of Boaz from Bethlehem. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. Okay, first of all, she called her my daughter. So Naomi still considers Ruth part of her family, even though the family tie has been severed with the death of her husband. And I forget whether Ruth was married to Mahlon or Chilion, but either way, that tie has been severed. But Ruth has clung to Naomi. And Naomi, here we see this adoptive thing. Like, yes, you don't have any legal standing with me anymore, but you are part of my family, and I refuse to give that up. So here we see the first example of adoption in Ruth. Well, actually the second, because Ruth sort of adopts Naomi when she said, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God, where you lodge. So that Ruth is actually the first one that adopts anyone. But here we see the reciprocal adoption of Naomi as she calls her daughter. This language is also important because in the Hebrew, it's a little bit archaic, and it's characteristic of older people in the Bible when they speak. They, we might consider like our grandparents spoke a little bit more formally than we might. So that comes across here. This is one of the reasons why we assume that Boaz was probably older. He's probably more Naomi's age rather than closer to Ruth's age, although it could be different. But he uses the same language later on, and it's a little bit more characteristic of older people when they say my daughter. let me go out and glean. Okay, so glean. We mentioned before that women who were widowed, well, women in general in the Old Testament times did not have legal representation, um, except for a man in their household or their clan, or something, their close relative. That didn't mean that they didn't have any rights or that they were treated as property or anything like that. It was just as they handled business, that was something that you needed. You needed a male representative to be your advocate in those places. So um, widows who didn't have that were really at the mercy then of the community. And God actually established a sort of welfare program way back in the book of Leviticus. And so let's go to Leviticus 23, verse 22. This is after God establishes the Feast of Passover and the Feast of Weeks. He gives this command in Leviticus 23:22. He says, "And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest." So after you've cut the grain, you've stacked it all up, there's going to be some that fall on the ground. You don't get to go back and pick all those up and leave your get every head of grain out of your field. God doesn't allow that. He says if it falls out, you have to leave it. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So this was a way in which the community provided a food bank for people like Ruth, like Naomi. Naomi's not out there gleaning for herself because, well, frankly, she's probably not strong enough. Because we're going to see that Ruth is pretty buff. If if Boaz is a mensch, then Ruth, she's an icon, man. She lifts, okay, because what she carries from the field home is quite impressive. Maybe not so much today, as we'll see what she's sent home with, but in the future, man, she could probably lift more than I can. So Ruth is an icon, all right. But this was the way that the community provided for the people in their midst who had nobody to care for them. And so this would be common practice. And so that's what Ruth is aware of. And that's why she says, I'm going to go and glean. Now, Ruth has no legal standing. Technically, you could say she's not even of the family of Naomi anymore because the marriage was dissolved at death. And so she is just a foreigner of the most hated foreign places who is now gleaning of the harvest. She entering the field of any Israelite would be the lowest of the low. She's probably going to be at the very back of the crowd of widows and travelers that are going through picking up. She's going to get the leftover of the leftovers. She's going to be the first person to go home empty-handed if there's not enough. Okay? That's what she is prepared for, and she knows it because she's not married to anybody from Bethlehem anymore, and she comes from Moab. So Ruth is ready to accept this, and still she's ready to go out and work. Okay? Naomi says, go. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. So we're told this again, that he has a family connection to her. But he doesn't know her in particular, not by sight anyway. Behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. Boaz is of the tribe of Judah, and he comes from Bethlehem. This is the first big sign that goes up that says, when we're talking about Boaz, start thinking about Jesus, okay? Jesus of the tribe of Judah, born in Bethlehem, right? And he is righteous. He is the righteous, he is the most righteous of any righteous one, right? So Boaz is this great picture of masculinity and faithfulness. Jesus is so much more because he's the perfect example of all of this. But Boaz is a foreshadowing of Jesus. So a lot of the things that Boaz does, the way that Boaz is, and even where Boaz comes from, are going to point us to truths about Jesus. And therefore, Ruth becomes a picture of us, the church. And you see so many things. There's no reason that God should love us. There's no reason that Boaz should care about Ruth, right? We're foreigners, we're enemies because we curse God. We are at enmity with God because of our sin, right? But he adopts us into his family. We're going to see Boaz adopt Ruth here very quickly, right? He provides for us, and then he redeems us. Boaz is Jesus. Ruth is us, okay? Put that in your brain. We should put that in our remember points. Here, let's see if I can do this on the fly, huh? I'm not sure what happens when I do this, like when you're watching. So Boaz, let's put equals Jesus. Ruth equals us. Okay. Do you see that on your screen? All right. So whenever we're talking about this, have that in your mind, because this isn't just a story about Ruth and Boaz. Okay. It is a prefigurement. It teaches us. It is God foreshadowing what he's going to do with Jesus for us. Okay. All right. That's one of the things that makes Ruth so incredible, is it's not just this beautiful story about two people. It's a story about our redemption and how God is and how we are and how we relate and the way that God redeems. It's just incredible. So, okay. All right. Boaz comes from Bethlehem, the house of bread, right? And he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Now, here's something interesting. Here we see that Boaz actually lives his faith, okay? Because he has taught his household and his employees this common response. It's as if on Sunday morning, I stand up in front and I say, "The Lord be with you." And depending upon which hymnal you're used to, you say, "And also with you," or "And with thy spirit." It is something that is, we just had May the 4th, and those Star Wars nerds are always like, "May the 4th be with you." And then the Lutheran Star Wars nerds, "And also with you," or "With thy spirit," right? Whatever. So maybe that's fresh in your mind, but that's an antiphonal response. It's a back and forth, right? I say one thing, you say one thing back to me, and it's in our worship service. Okay, it's the lungs that breathe back and forth. It's the valves of the heart that boom, 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 boom. It's because church is a living, breathing thing when the people are there. It's one of the reasons why we use a pipe organ, because it makes sound the same way that the human body does, because we are the body of Christ, and the whole church just resonates with praise, okay? And so that back and forth between pastor and people is like the lungs or the heart beating. And here Boaz does that with his workers out in the field. He is not ashamed of his faith, and this is how he greets them, and they're so used to it that they respond like that. Again, Boaz is a mensch. He is an honorable man, and he is not ashamed of his faith, and he lives his faith with his employees even. Okay? Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" This is not a question of property. He's talking about, where does she come from? What tribe does she belong to? All of that. He's saying, I do not recognize this person. She might even be dressed differently than everybody else. A social cue that says, whoa, we have somebody from far off here, right? And immediately, this young man who is in charge of the reapers replies, "She is the Moabite woman that has come back with Naomi from the country of Moab." Doesn't know a thing about her, not even her name, other than that she's a Moabite. And he makes that clear. And so there is this point at which Boaz could have been like, "Get her out of here." So she came back with Naomi, but that meant that her husband was dead. So she's not tied to Naomi's family at all. She's just a hanging around. That's what she is. Get rid of her. I don't want her on my land. Put her in the back of everybody if she has to be here at all. All of that. He could have said all that. You can imagine his foreman being like, "I wonder how he's going to handle this," So right here, we see that Boaz is going to have this incredible reaction to how all this works. All right. Um, he reports what she said. She said, please. She understands her place, that she doesn't have a right to this. So she's asking for permission, even though God gave them permission inside of the Old Testament laws, right? I don't know if you can hear the dogs. At noon, they always chime in with our Carillon bells. It's like a chorus of dogs out there. Anyway, sorry. I'm just having a hard time concentrating with that going on across the street. Oh, Ruth understands her place in this society, and she is prim and proper, and she says, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. And so he remarks, so she came and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. His foreman says, man, she's been working hard all day, right? Here we see that again, that Ruth, man, Ruth has some guns. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Like she is a hard worker. Even the foreman is like, man, she's been out here since early morning and she hasn't stopped. Now that's probably because she anticipates that she's going to get the last of the last, and so she's going to have to work harder than everybody else. So, but already we see something about her character. She's a hard worker. She's polite. She is considerate of Naomi's needs, and she's not afraid of work. All desirable qualities for any human. And so this impresses the foreman. So immediately we're informed that Boaz has all the things on his side. He's from the right place. He's from Bethlehem. He is a mighty man of valor. He's well respected. He has all these good characteristics, contrasted with Ruth, who comes from Moab. All right, she's a widow, okay, but she's a hard worker, and she's considerate of Naomi, and she's polite. And so we're given this picture of two people that come from disparate backgrounds, but have some of the similar qualities. And I think they recognize each other in that very quickly. They see each other as, hey, this is a good person. There's just something that transcends anything they may know about each other, that they just can tell, okay? Because right here in verse 8, then Boaz said to Ruth, so he goes and he talks to this woman. Now imagine that, if you're Ruth and you're there and you're picking up grain in this guy's field, and here comes this guy probably on horseback, and all the foreman runs up to him immediately, and when this man calls out, everybody responds, right? Because this is the man, this is the boss, and now he's riding up to you, and you know that you barely have a right to be there. And you got to be wondering, what is he going to say? Is he going to send me home? Are we going to have enough food? What am I going to do? And look at how he addresses her. The first words to Ruth from Boaz. Listen, my daughter. He adopts her before he knows anything about her. Right? Other than she's been working in his field and that she's somehow tied to Naomi, and he recognizes, wait, if she's tied to Naomi, that means that she was tied to one of those sons that died. They're of my clan. But they were in Moab, and she's from Moab. I don't have to think of her as family. But from the very beginning, he responds with mercy and grace and love and acceptance and adoption. It's beautiful. Listen, my daughter. Sometimes we wonder like how old Boaz would have been. He was probably of similar age to Naomi, because remember I told you that there's this kind of old language style that comes across in the Hebrew. As he says, listen, my daughter, he addresses her the same way that Naomi addressed her. So probably Naomi and Boaz are closer in age than Boaz and Ruth. Plus, Boaz always talks about my young women, my young men. You should be gleaning amongst them. Whose young woman is this? All of that tells us that there's probably a generational age gap between them. And we like to read into that and go, oh, yeah, look, this older man preying on this pretty young thing, right? There is so little romantic love in Ruth. It's because we don't have a concept of love that's apart from that, really. I mean, we have familial love, that sort of thing, but there's always suspicion, right, between male and female relationships, regardless of age. Um, and so we can look at this as, the old man with power and money has this young side piece, right? Um, she just happened to be from Moab. He took advantage of her. She's gold digging or whatever. There's always this suspicion. That seems to be almost entirely absent from this relationship, because this relationship for Ruth and Boaz is about redemption, about God keeping his promise to have the land stay with his people. And that the promised land is a prefigurement of eternity. So it's a promise of heaven. So heaven belongs to the family of Elimelech too. They don't ever lose that. And Boaz redeems that and makes that possible for that land to be theirs. So Boaz gets them into heaven. Jesus, it's all linked, okay? And so the romantic side of it, the sexual side of it, is so far in the background. It's really just a function of what needs to happen. I'm not saying that there wasn't any sort of attraction or love that developed between Ruth and Boaz once they were married. But I'm saying that's not what's driving this. Boaz probably is married already, has his own family. This is about duty. And before we say, well, God wants one man, one woman, why does he allow it? Okay, he set this up in the Old Testament to accomplish a purpose, not because he wanted everybody to have more than one spouse. All right, he condemns that in many places. But in the process of retaining land, right, there is this marriage between Boaz and Ruth to keep God's promise. So I'm not saying it wasn't loveless, that there wasn't an attraction there that developed, but that concept is almost entirely absent from the history, the story of these two until later. Okay, so just put that out of your mind. Think about this is Boaz wanting to be faithful to his duty as a redeemer. Okay, all right. We'll come back to that many times because, again, we try to read into our own suspicions and accusations into something that the Bible doesn't reveal. Let the Bible speak for itself, okay? He calls her my daughter. And then he tells her, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one. He's not kicking her out. Rather, he's forcing her to stay. But keep close to my young women. So he's saying, stay close to my family. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping. So go with them. Don't feel that you have to stay behind. Go after them. Go with my family. And then he says, have I not charged the young men not to touch you? This is a rhetorical question. Ruth didn't know this. Boaz gave a command. All right. And so here we see another characteristic of Boaz, that he is respectable and he is obeyed. He understands that his hired hands might be kind of rough men, and they might be kind of rude, and they might even look at somebody that doesn't have a legal representative in their community and has nobody to defend as an easy target for their sin. It happened. Sin is sin back then. But Boaz sat them all down and goes, you do not touch this woman. I don't care where she's from. She's going to go with my family members, with people from my clan and my tribe. You do not touch her or you will answer to me. And he is obeyed across the board. It's an incredible statement of protection and care. Okay. And it's definitive. It's accomplished. The perfect tense in the Hebrew here says it is accomplished as he says it. It is as real as if God had said, let there be light, and there was light. And so he says, have I not charged them not to touch you? It's like, they're not going to. It's so sure and certain, right? And then he says, and when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Okay. You gotta understand what's going on here in the culture. So first of all, there's a lot of places where foreigners would have been required to draw water for Israelites. That's the first sort of hierarchy here. Drawing water is tough business, right? You gotta haul it up, you gotta carry it. Water's heavy. If you've ever camped and backpacked your water, oof, water is heavy. And also, then women would have been the ones who would draw water for men. So Ruth, being a foreigner and being a woman, would have been the lowest of the low again. She would have been the one that, instead of gleaning what was left over from everybody, she would be also hauling water for everybody. But Boaz says, no, not only are you not going to be doing the job of hauling water, you're going to be free to go and drink like everybody else, but I also will have you drink what men have drawn for you. Boaz actually orders his young men to care for Ruth. Again, remember, Boaz, Jesus, all right? Let's jump to John 4, 1 through 29. Jesus. When Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize one of his disciples, he left Judea, departed again for Galilee, and he passed through Samaria. He came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Okay, similar setting. Okay, Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Now, this is late in the day. Normally, people would be there early in the morning, but this woman is a foreigner, and also she's shacked up with some guy. Jesus knows this, so she's living in sin, and so she went to the well later when everybody else would be gone, so she wouldn't have to deal with their prejudice against her background and also the shame of living in sin. The Samaritan, Jesus says to her, give me a drink. Again, she's a foreigner and she's a woman. Okay, she should be doing this. But the problem is, this woman says, well, I'm a Samaritan and Jews don't want to have anything to do with us, so why are you asking me? She's a little bit snotty with Jesus. Okay. And Jesus said, if you knew the gift of God and who it was that was saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The entire thing would have been reversed, and you would be drinking water that are drawn from Israelite men. Right? Jesus said, I would serve you. I, a man from Bethlehem, an Israelite, would give you living water. And she says, sir, give me this water always, right? The water that I will give him will become in him a spring to water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I'll not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. Then Jesus says, go call your husband. She says, I don't have any husband. He's like, yeah, that's right. It's because you've been shacked up with 5 guys. And the one you're living with now is not your husband either. And then she says, I perceive you're a prophet. And then she pulls out this difference between Samaritans and Jews, but Jesus gives her the clearest revelation that he is the Messiah of anybody in the New Testament. Jesus says to her directly, I am he. I am the Messiah. Then she goes off into town and tells everybody that she met a man who said everything she had ever done, and that she's actually proud of this. I don't want to meet a man that's going to tell everyone everything I've ever done. No, thank you. I don't want people to know every bad thing I've ever done. But she is so impressed with Jesus that this is what she does. But the point here in the connection we see is that Jesus, a man from Bethlehem, is basically saying, I will provide water for you, a foreign woman, right? And Boaz, back in Ruth 2, says, not only were you not going to have to draw water for anybody else, but my guys, my representatives, are going to be drawing water for you. So again, we see who Jesus is pictured here in who Boaz is and what Boaz does. All right. Ruth 2:10, her response to all this is to fall down on her face, something that people do in the presence of God. So again, this is, she's not saying like just that Boaz is so great. She understands that he's in charge, and she's just overcome with the thanksgiving. But also here there is the connection that Boaz here is a stand-in for Jesus. And after Jesus provides for us more than we could ever ask, what is our natural response? We bow down before him and give thanks. She said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes? It's unmerited grace, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner." But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me." So he's found out about her, and how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. This language is important, a people that you did not know. Because if Boaz is a stand-in for Jesus, who is God in the flesh, God says this in many places. It's a major theme in the Old Testament that God will call people who did not know him. For instance, Isaiah 55:5. "Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God and the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you." Boaz acknowledges that you have come to a people that did not know you, that you did not know before and did not know you. Now you're here. We have drawn you to this through this representative of Jesus, this Boaz. There's just so many connections that unless you are familiar with the rest of the scriptures, you would miss in this beautiful, beautiful interaction between these two. But there is so much of the Bible that is bound up in what they're doing that you can see God kind of giving you a hint of what is to come 1,000 years from now in their interaction. It's incredible. You see the Holy Spirit guiding the writing of the scriptures so that these connections are made across continents, across generations, across authors, across language. Just incredible. 12, the Lord, again, he is talking about Yahweh, repay you for what you have done, and a full reward will be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. He recognizes that she is also a woman of faith, and so he blesses her. Again, Boaz lives his faith. He confesses his faith. It's not something he is ashamed of, and he actually commands God to give her a blessing. And God allows that. God does do that. Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." Again, she recognizes her societal position here. And so I think she's kind of asking Boaz, do you really want to do this? Because I'm not connected to you, and you know where I'm from, and I really appreciate it, but are you sure this is what you want to do? And we're going to see Boaz's answer here in the next section. 14. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread, and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers. She's sitting with the men at table. And he, as Boaz, passed to her roasted grain. She's eating at the table with Boaz and his young men. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Okay, how do we connect this to Jesus? First of all, you remember Matthew 26. Jesus is at the Lord's Supper. He's eating with his disciples. They asked, "Who is that will betray me?" And he said, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me." He's talking about Judas, this most unworthy of the disciples, right? And yet Jesus is sitting at table with him. Jesus even says, "What you must do, go and do quickly." But he's not, condemning Judas. He's not saying like everything you've ever done is worthless. Get out of here. Leave me alone. You don't belong here. There's no place for you at this table. Jesus takes the worst of the worst and he eats with him. Boaz is taking the least of the least and invites her to his table and is dipping the bread in the same cup, the same way that Jesus did with his disciples. Okay, that beautiful connection. She ate until she was satisfied and she had some left over. Jesus, Matthew 14, when he feeds the 5,000, right? He broke the loaves, gave them to the disciples. The disciples gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Provides more than is necessary. Boaz does the same. He not only feeds her, he gives her more than she can eat. She even gets to take it home. He's providing for Naomi too. It's incredible. So Boaz is a picture of Jesus who is to come. When she rose to glean, so she's going back to work, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So remember how we talked about how being she has no connection anymore to the Israelite land, and she's from a terrible place called Moab, that she would be at the end of the crowd of people that were gleaning. So she would get just the leftovers, probably not much at all, if anything. Instead, Boaz now brought her to his table, fed her till she couldn't eat anymore. And now he's saying, okay, you got to take some home for tomorrow and for Naomi and all that. So he says, we're going to move her to the front of the line. And in fact, we're actually going to move her in front of the place where people should be gleaning. We're going to let her gather amongst the grain that was just harvested. And beyond that, I also want you to take out a few and just drop them on the side for her to pick up. It's an incredible provision above and beyond what he would be called to do. So far, it's almost objectionable. You can almost imagine his reapers being like, Lord, like, really? I mean, you're already doing so much, and now you want to sacrifice part of your harvest on purpose for her? But again, there is no questioning of Boaz in here by his employees. It's just, he is the man. He is the boss. And they just go, yes, sir. And that is it. He gets the final word. So she gleaned in the field until evening. So she has been there from probably before sunrise until now that the sun is setting. She beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley, which is a lot, apparently. An ephah of barley is going to be about 30 pounds of grain. So when you go to the grocery store and you pick up that 5-pound bag of flour, okay, imagine carrying around 6 of those, right, in your arms, and you got to trudge it all the way back to where you live, which it probably isn't near. It's probably miles. So I'm telling you, do not try to arm wrestle Ruth, man. She will throw you off the table, okay? This is just the first inkling we get that Ruth is a strong woman, okay? So she's going to carry this all the way back. It's a large amount. So she's carrying 30 pounds of grain, plus she's got the food left over from lunch, and she is trudging it back to Naomi's house. She took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And a light goes on for Naomi. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, notice how the narrator here even puts this in there. Daughter-in-law. Again, that marital relationship has been severed with death, till death do us part. But Naomi has adopted her by calling her a daughter, so the narrator respects that adoption and here lists her as her daughter-in-law still, even though the sons are dead. May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. He is the one who looks after both the living and the dead, like Jesus, right? Who will come to judge both the living and the dead. Naomi also said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours." Ours, not mine, but ours. She's still including her in the family. Adoption. One of our redeemers. So here we get the first inclination of this legal dilemma. Naomi cannot repossess this land on her own. She needs a redeemer to legally represent her and pay the price for it. That needs to be somebody from her husband's own clan, a Bethlehemite from the tribe of Judah. There's no direct relative in her own immediate family, so they're going to cousins, nephews, that sort of thing, okay? She acknowledges that there are several guys who could fit this role, and Boaz is not the closest redeemer. He is one of them. That's going to set us up for this interaction between Boaz and this unnamed member of the clan that comes in a little bit later, okay? But right here, Naomi kind of senses that this is a possibility for us to get everything back the way that God wants it to be. And it may happen through Boaz. And it seems that Naomi puts all of their eggs in a basket, so to speak, because she kind of invests in Boaz and not these other redeemers. Why? I don't know. Maybe she knew that the guy in front of Boaz for the line of redemption is kind of a schlub. I don't know. But for whatever reason, Naomi says this is our best bet to get everything back, to be redeemed. Okay? All right. So she acknowledges that this is one of their redeemers. Goels in the Hebrew, Goel. The word redeemer occurs, I think, 7 times in the next chapter. So just so you know, we're going to be talking a lot about redeemers in 2 weeks. 2 weeks because I'm going to be at convention next week, so I won't be here. So you have to wait 2 weeks for chapter 3. This is one of our redeemers. And then the narrator responds, Ruth the Moabite. Again, why does he have to call her the Moabite here? Because he's pointing out God's grace. God swore off the Moabites, saying that they would never be redeemed. And yet here, Naomi is saying like, yep, he's one of our redeemers. Naomi knows the grace of God and knows that he will welcome in these people that he has sworn off because he is that great and that good. Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest. So Ruth is just amazed at this. This man not only let her stay, but said, I need you to come back and I've set up this place for you. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, again, look at just this wonderful, just the inclusion of these words, constantly pointing out people's status, both for good and for ill, right? Her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. Naomi recognizes the danger to Ruth, not only in that she has no legal recourse for anybody that would violate her, that everybody looked down on her, so even her complaints about something would probably go unheard, and recognizes that even if she was an Israelite, She would be worried about her working in a field with these reapers and these harvesters. Okay, but Boaz has spread his protective wings over her. That's again language that Jesus talks about when he talks about Jerusalem. I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks, right? I would have spread my wings over you. Boaz says that you have sought refuge under the Lord's wings. Again, Boaz is this picture of Jesus, okay? Protective of Ruth. And that, again, this is what real men do. Real men are protectors, not just of their own people, their own family members, but anybody who might need them. And so we want to raise men to be masculine enough to speak up on behalf of those that are in danger or that may or may not need our help. Maybe this woman that is being yelled at by this man in the parking lot is fully capable of beating him to a pulp. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak up and say, is there a problem here? Does anybody need any help? Even if they say, we got it handled, man. Mind your own business. All right. But I want to raise men that at least speak up, even if they're not needed. If that's toxic, well, then let me know in the comments. But you can't, because the comments are turned off. One of the beautiful things. Sorry. Masculinity in its goodness. Boaz is this picture. And femininity in its goodness. Ruth is this picture. It's beautiful. The way that God has made us. Different, beloved, equally cared for by God above, and yet so very different and made for each other. And Ruth and Boaz, we see this. Verse 23. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So this is how the narrator indicates that there has been time that has passed. How much time? Not really sure, but this is what we're given, that they have. I'm not sure how long the harvests have taken, but this isn't just a one-time thing. This Ruth and Boaz interaction with his workers and all that. This is kind of an ongoing, and again, we're given no indication that Boaz had to come out and every day remind his young men to leave her alone. He's just obeyed, and he's respected enough that the sounds like his workers are a little bit afraid of him. And yet he's so nice and so kind and so godly that they're just like so yeah, there's a lot that's, women wait for your Boaz, that sort of talk out there in the Christian circles. And it's not wrong, because Boaz is the total package, as it were, right? And yet we're not told how he got there. Depictions of him being overwhelmingly wealthy may not be true. He might have just been sort of, run-of-the-mill landowner. He does have enough to hire workers and all that, but he may not have a vast empire and millions of dollars. But we're definitely given this picture of a man who is respected, who is successful, who is accomplished. And we're given this picture of a woman who is strong, who is considerate, who is brave, who is polite, who is bold at times. And both of them are faithful, and both of them count on the Lord and trust in the Lord. And we see that over and over again. All through this, always remember that Boaz is a picture of the Jesus who is to come. Ruth is a picture of the church, the redemption that happens. They're prefigurements of the grand plan of salvation that God is setting up to be accomplished through Jesus. And Jesus only comes about genealogically, familially, because of Ruth and Boaz. They are his progenitors. They are his ancestors. And so this happening right here and now is setting up the birth of Jesus to Mary and Joseph down the line. Hope you found something beautiful in the study of Ruth chapter 2 today. Reminder that I will not be with you next week because I'll be at a pastor's convention. I'll be out of town on Wednesday. So look for chapter 3 the week following. May God bless you all. Pray for our young people, especially our faithful young people, that they find other faithful young people and that they find their Ruth, their Boaz, and that it's the best thing that we can hope for them. So that is my encouragement for you this week. The young people in your life, the young people in your church, pray for them. And maybe ask your pastor if you could include a prayer for the single and the dating, that they would abide in chastity. That's an important thing. That they would be protected, because the dating world is a dangerous one. We see that in Ruth chapter 2. And that they would ultimately find that person that God made especially for them, and that they would be united and live happily ever after. God's blessings to you all. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.